Thank you for joining me today on the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast for moms who know that when they take care of themselves, they can take better care of everyone else. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and today is an episode of Couples Who Know, and I'm here with my co-host and husband, James.
I hope you're all shouting hooray that it's a Couples Who Know podcast. I'm always excited for these. Glad to be with you. Chanel and I have been talking about relationships as a whole and some ideas that we could share. And we wanted to discuss today about relationships becoming stale or stagnant or the boredom, monotony of relationships. Some ideas for you and some tips to overcome some of these things that might be a stumbling block into boredom. So I'm going to talk today and start off with limerence. And maybe some of you have heard this word before. So limerence, it includes obsessive thoughts or fantasies, how it's going to be. And they say that it has a shelf life of about 2 years. So when you're first starting to fall in love with your spouse, you're dating, and you're in this state of limerence, right? Like they just can do no wrong. And it was amazing because I was just Mr. Perfect, right? And same thing with Chanel. I just thought, oh, she could do no wrong. In fact, I remember I had a truck, this Dodge truck, right? And I just really, really liked this truck. And I let Chanel borrow it. We weren't married at the time.
We were dating, yeah.
We were dating. And I let her borrow it to do whatever she needed to do. And she came back and I don't know if you were crying but you were really upset.
Yeah.
And she said, James, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like, what happened? Are you okay? What happened? She's like, I am so sorry, but I kind of got in an accident with your truck. I mean, it wasn't bad, but I'm like, oh, well, let's go look at it. And it was a pretty good crease in the side of the bed. And I was like, oh, like, no problem. So yeah, just that's limerence, right? Pretty good example.
It was pretty small, I would say.
Small. So anyway, that's the idea of limerence, but experts say that, as I mentioned, it only has a shelf life of 2 years. And so I was listening to this TED Talk about limerence, and the person delivering this speech was saying how, that goes away. And so she wanted to find out how to keep it alive. How can you keep that? Well, unfortunately, you can't put that in a bottle and cap it. It's not stable. You can't keep that. Life continues to go on. And so that kind of wears out, and the things that didn't used to bother you start to bother you a little bit. So Chanel was going to talk a little bit about familiarity, but I wanted to bring up limerence to the forefront of your mind because I think that we can get there. We can get back to that state. Sometimes we can bring ourselves back to when we were in that state of limerence and having things not bother us so much.
Yeah, okay, I like that concept, and I like the idea that we know that, okay, things are going to change as you go on in a relationship. And with familiarity, just being very familiar with each other, knowing this person so well, that's good and that's bad at the same time, right? When you are married, you see each other at your absolute worst. You see each other first thing when you wake up in the morning and you have crazy hair and you have morning breath, or when you're sick and, you're making gross noises in the bathroom and all these things, everything bad, every worst part of the human experience you see in your spouse. And so there's that side of it. And then there's also the idea that familiarity, we're not necessarily, after we know each other for a while and we're married for a while, we let our guard down. And what I mean by that is we're not always on our best behavior. When you're dating, when you're new to a relationship, you're really trying to put your best foot forward and show the good side of you. And marriage, after a while, you're going to see every side of your spouse. And so that idea of being in a long-term committed relationship, a marriage that's going to last, you're going to come up against these things. Familiarity just kind of brings a whole new set of challenges.
It does. When I think of familiarity, I'm thinking of, these late night talks that you used to have of sharing your dreams turning into the monotony of it all. Mm-hmm. Like, who's going to pick up the kids tomorrow? Okay, good night. Stuff like that. So I think it can be dangerous when you get into this zone of familiarity. And really, familiarity is the breeding ground for contempt. And it just is, because you can create this feeling in your relationship of just being too familiar with one another. And maybe what I'm trying to say is not being as respectful as you used to be. I think that you can get into trouble with something like double kidding. Maybe there's a little snittiness, I like that word, to your tone sometimes. What I mean by double kidding is just like you'll say like, oh, just kidding, after you slam your spouse, and oh, just kidding. But and you're not. So just things to look out for. So I hope that as we go and give you some ideas, some tips, like I talked about earlier, that you can break some of these familiarity patterns. And we'll talk about later, familiarity is actually not a bad thing sometimes.
Right, totally. So when you say familiarity breeds contempt, I have to mention, it just goes through my head, this book we read out loud to the kids. It's called Elijah of Buxton by Christopher Paul Curtis, I think. And if you're looking for a good read aloud, that is such a fun book. But in this book, these young boys go to school and their teacher writes it on the board, familiarity breeds contempt. And he's so angry because he saw one of the boys at school or outside of school, and the boy just said, hey, to him and not hello, sir, or whatever he had been taught. And the teacher was so mad that he got familiar with him instead of being respectful.
Right.
And so that's the whole idea of this contempt, is like James was saying, less respect and just more casualness in the relationship. Now, of course, you want to be comfortable in your relationship, but there's a difference between being comfortable and being casual.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you still want to pay attention to that and still have that level of respect. So what we want to talk about now is, so we can see kind of the downsides of familiarity and how it can cause problems in a relationship. So how do you keep this familiarity or this boredom from kind of killing the relationship, from it leading to not the relationship you want to have? So we have 10 ways that we can work on this and that we can do this. The first one is appreciation. So really having eyes to see and looking out for the good things in your spouse is going to let this familiarity kind of take a back seat. Because when you're actively looking for the good and when you're actively appreciating the things that your spouse does, that's going to help to keep a positive attitude and help you to see the good rather than see the bad.
Right. Good point. Okay, so the next one we wanted to talk about was, don't assume bad intent from your spouse. I really like this line that I read in the this book, Marriageology. Is that what it's called? Really good book as we were researching this. And she says, decline to ascribe a bad intention to your spouse's actions. Your spouse is not out to get you. I think that is the natural man and woman in all of us, that we just sometimes ascribe to these bad intentions and assume the worst. If we can look at our spouse as that they are not out to get us, I think that you'll find that they're really not. And they're not against you, but they're for you. And I think when you mirror that, or when you show that to your spouse, it's so much easier for them to feel like you're not against them. So tone inflections, all of those kinds of things, don't assume bad intent.
Yeah, I think that this is a huge one. It's really has to do with our interpretation, right? This is us saying, oh, what you just did means that. We're saying what this action meant to us. Whenever I think about intentions and being misunderstood, I worked at a weight loss camp. This was many years ago. And there was a nutritionist who would stand at the food line and tell the kids, so this was a weight loss camp for kids, and I was teaching fitness classes there. And as the kids would go through the line, the nutritionist would tell each of them, you can have one of these desserts and one of these, each of these food items, and kind of let them know. She had stepped aside to do something in the kitchen, and a kid was going through the line and almost didn't get their dessert. And I said, oh, hey, you can have one of those desserts, because I knew that you could. And she had come out and heard me say that, and she was so mad. She thought I was trying to take over her job and that I was stepping on her toes, and, just that wasn't an appropriate thing for me to do. And it's just, I always think about that because I had no bad intentions at all. I didn't want to do her job. I just wanted this kid to get their dessert. And it's really interesting how quick we are a lot of times to just assume something. And in our marriage, because, we've been together for a while and there's so much context and history in our relationship, sometimes we think we know when we really don't.
I just need to clarify something here because I was at that same camp. No, I'm not.
This was actually the one, before.
Chanel and I, really quick backstory. We did a camp together. It was a weight loss camp. It was a summer fitness vacation, right? And these rich people would send their kids away for like a week or a month or whatever it was. And they'd get their dessert, if you can call it that. That was my clarification.
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, dessert, right. It's like this whatever nasty thing.
Yes.
When we were at that camp, it was in San Diego, and the San Diego Chargers, the NFL team, was practicing there, and it was the same cafeteria. So these kids are sharing a cafeteria with the NFL Chargers on the other side, right? And they've got like this gourmet, awesome food and these like huge cookies, like pie tin shaped cookies, like the size of pie tins. Anyway, I made friends with the cafeteria lady, and she always gave me one of those cookies. So that's a dessert.
Yeah.
Anyway, had to share that because that's fun. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was...
Actually, mine.
Oh, yeah, actually
I'm number
yours.
3. So number
Yes,
3
please.
is making the relationship a priority. So I love this one. I think this is huge in keeping from boredom because you're putting energy into your relationship.
Right.
It's not just like, oh yeah, we did that, we got married, we're done with that, now we go on with our lives. No, you are putting this energy and intention into your relationship, and that looks different for every couple. But for us, what that looks like is the regular rituals that we have, things like going out on dates, things like having regular time set aside to work on our marriage, those kind of things, those kind of check-ins, kissing hello, kissing goodbye, those things that show, yes, you matter to me, this relationship matters to me, turning down sometimes other opportunities. Like, there are a lot of things that can come up and be great. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do, individual activities. We're actually going to talk a little more about that later. But sometimes we have to look at, okay, what do I want versus what is best for this relationship as a whole, and really making sure that whatever that answer is, whatever that looks like for you, that relationship, the marriage relationship, is prioritized.
Oh, so good. I was just going to share one thing really quick on that. I did an exercise where I sat down and did my life priorities. And I don't know that I shared this with you, but you were my first priority. I'm glad. And I wanted to just share that it was a neat experience for me to prioritize how I'll show my wife that she's my first priority. I'll have to share that with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is a really good one. Now I wanted to talk about noticing the good. And in this TED Talk that I made reference to earlier, the speaker talks about different lenses that we see through. And we have these, rose-colored glasses sometimes. That's during our limerence stage. But she talked about Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and I thought that was so funny because Goldilocks, if you see it from her point of view, she's just so tired and she just needs, she's hungry, poor Goldilocks, and she needs to find a place to eat and rest. And if you look at it from the bear's perspective, these bears are out there taking a nice family walk, and they come home, and their home is totally ransacked, and all the bears are wondering who's in their house. And I just think that if you can try to take a deep breath when things get hot and just do a paradigm shift, maybe a mind exercise where you look at this as, how can I notice the good here? What's the good in this familiarity? And I'll talk about togetherness in teams and how familiarity can be a good thing. But I just wanted to point out to notice the good.
Awesome. Okay. The next one is novelty. So the opposite of familiarity is novelty, right? We have things that are new or things that are kind of old and familiar. And in the One Little Thing workshop that I do, this is actually one of the things we talk about to get our habits in order and to figure out kind of what our habits are and what's working for us. And some people really thrive on novelty. I am one of those people. I like things that are new. If we're going out, I really like to go to a new restaurant. I like to do, when I do my yoga, I do yoga every morning. I like to do a new yoga video almost every morning. I like to switch it up. I like to switch up all kinds of things, just what we do, what we eat, what we see, where we travel even. I'm not the kind of person who wants to get a cabin and go there every single winter. I want to see new places every time we travel. So novelty, how that works. And also, side note, James is a little bit more, prefers the familiar a little bit more.
I do. I'm the boring guy that likes to chain restaurants because I know what to expect. I know it's going to be good. Right?
And if we don't go to a chain, sometimes he'll order the thing that looks the most familiar.
Oh, you're outing me. Boring.
No, but it's just a good thing to recognize, and to recognize that for you, more familiarity is not going to be as much of a problem as it is for me, and to see what that is. And I don't think you're boring, but I think that that's something just to be aware of and to build novelty in, especially if you're a person who thrives on that, to say, okay, well, the novelty here, the relationship is going to be familiar. It's still going to be the two of us, but how can I create novelty? Can we go somewhere new? Can we talk about something different? Can we, find some way to explore something together or take a new class together or something to where even though it's the same person and you have the same personalities and lots of things are the same, there's this element of novelty, there's this element of newness, and that brings excitement to a familiar relationship.
It does. I think it brings some of that limerence back, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh, this is like so fun. We're exploring this together. We're doing this new thing together. And that can be fun. And you know what? It could even be fun to explore something that your spouse likes that maybe you're not so into and get to know it better. So
yeah. So on that, I don't know the science here of actual limerence and whether this is true or not, but it's cool to think about either way. Is that so? Limerence is talking about when you're in a new relationship and you have all these feelings and everything's exciting. Well, if you kind of think about it on next level. Say you've never taken ballroom dance before and you decide to do ballroom dance as a couple, you could sort of have that limerence experience with ballroom dance. You're in love with ballroom dance and you're thinking about it and you're excited about it and you're having all those feelings, but you're having them with your spouse. And so that kind of spreads out to the relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the next one is a topic that I think is, or an idea, tip rather, is something that has really worked for us and has really, really blessed our marriage. And that is pray together. Pray together and for each other. This marriageology book I was talking about, it's not a religious author that I know of. I mean, it's not a religious book, but she cites all of these studies done that showed couples praying together and for each other have so much more marital satisfaction is what the result of the survey was. Marital satisfaction. And I think there's really, really something to that. You're praying to God, your higher power, for your spouse, for their success. And something that was really cool in this study was that when you're praying together vocally and you hear what your spouse is saying, like you hear them actually praying for a specific thing for you, it's huge. I mean, it lets them know that you care about that. It lets them know that you're supplicating God's help. It's just so marvelous because it's that triangle, right? You and your spouse on the bottom with your higher power on top, and it completes that triangle to me in my eyes. And I just want to share my experience with that. When I hear my wife pray for me when she knows something is difficult or challenging, really helps me. It helps break up the monotony of what could happen in relationships, the monotony of just life, especially with children. It's so powerful. And I would just strongly suggest doing this. If you're not doing it already, try it. Just try it. And when you're praying also for somebody, when you're apart, when you're praying for someone, I mean, you can do this with anybody too. Maybe somebody at work that you're struggling with. It brings power. But it's more, even more so to your marriage when you're praying for your spouse.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I know that for me, a lot of times when James has done this and prayed for me out loud, it'll be like I'm telling him, in the course of the evening, telling him what I'm struggling with or things that I have coming up that I'm concerned about. And then to hear him pray about it and bring it to God lets me know, first, that he was listening, and second, that he really cares and is concerned. And I think that's huge. And I just had this thought while James was talking that, I recognize that we're really fortunate that we are of the same faith, and I know that not all couples are. But I think that whether you are or not, this is actually a thing that most couples can still tap into, because even if your spouse just wants nothing to do with hearing your prayers, you can still pray for them. But even if you're not of the same faith, you can still ask your spouse, can I pray for you? Can I say a prayer with you? I just want to pray about this with you, and see what happens, see if that is a possibility. So I think that's a great one. And I think it was really interesting in the book that James referenced that it wasn't a religious book, and this was actually talking about the science of praying together. Yeah, I thought that was cool. Okay, so the next one for keeping familiarity from killing the relationship is to keep growing individually. As a person, we need to have growth, and we need to have things to talk about with each other. When we are growing and we're excited and we bring that energy into the relationship, then it helps our relationship to grow. And I think that it's really important. It doesn't have to even be big things. Just the fact that you're listening to this podcast right now, then, say you've been home with the kids all day and you're listening to this podcast, and then your husband comes home, you have something new and something exciting and a way that you've grown from listening to this. And you can say, hey, honey, guess what I learned today? I would love to start praying with you, or whatever it is that stood out to you. I want to put this into action, or I learned this thing and this really stood out to me. And that growth is so cool to see in your spouse. And it kind of goes back to novelty, really, that we talked about. It's a way that you're bringing new things into your life, and that helps the relationship.
I just want to point out too, we've been married just under 20 years, but this is a true principle that can be applied to, a couple that's been married for 75 years. Continual growth, yeah, and sharing those things. I've seen it in my parents, particularly with my mom taking an interest with what my dad was doing, and it's neat. It's a neat thing. The next thing is the definition of a soulmate. I thought this is an interesting thought here. Just because things are familiar doesn't mean you picked wrong. And the thought of we don't find soulmates, we become them. I think that we can get kind of hung up on the whole soulmate thing, and it breaks my heart when I hear people say, we've just grown apart. I thought they were my soulmate. They're no longer my soulmate, or just fill in the blank, whatever it is. But I really love that idea that we don't find soulmates. We become them. We become the person that's perfect for our spouse, that's just right. And when you're growing together and growing as one, you will become each other's soulmates, if that's a word that makes you feel tingly inside. Some people search for this soulmate. And I just want to say that is so possible. Whatever stage of the relationship you're in, or whatever hardship you're going through in the relationship, you can become your spouse's soulmate. It's so possible. And it's pretty fun to do, and try to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that actually gave me chills. We had talked about this before, but hearing you say, we don't find soulmates, we become them, and we become that perfect soulmate for our spouse is so powerful because it's about us. How do I change? How do I become a little bit better? And it's so interesting in marriage, if we were single, I think we would have grown a lot differently at this point, having been, married for almost half of our lives now. It's just so interesting how you grow together. And you can see sometimes people growing apart in the relationship. And the idea of this is to bring us back together. And so the next one is service in marriage, to do things for each other. As you see what your spouse needs, and these don't have to be, I don't want anyone to think that means, you're subservient, to your spouse. James knows I am not all about, I'm not going to, make him every last meal and bring it to him on a tray. It's not like that, but I do find ways to serve him, and he finds ways to serve me, and we do things for the family. Another really interesting study that we read talked about when you ask for favors in your relationship, when you ask your spouse to serve you, you ask for something that you need, then the spouse that was asked to do something actually has better feelings toward you. And so I thought that was really interesting. And as I pondered that, I thought that makes sense to me, because when people say, no, I got this, I don't need help, I'm fine, what you're doing is closing yourself off. And when you're asking, admitting you need help and saying, hey, can you please help me with this? Can you handle this little thing for me that you are, you're so good at, and I need your help with it specifically? Well, then your spouse is going to see their worth to you. They're going to get a chance to serve you, and they feel good about that, because we feel good when we serve. And that just serves to, build the relationship even more.
Really good. Really good. One of the things that was pointed out in that study was, it might not be a good idea to ask a favor that's, something that you just don't want to do. Can you go wash the car? Can you do me a favor?
Can you go scrub the toilet?
Yeah, can you go scrub the toilet?
Yeah. That might not have the same level of relationship building.
But what you're saying, I was pondering that too as I was looking at this study, and it's so true. You involve the other person, you let them know that they're valued, that you do need their help. And when you're serving someone else that they've expressed that they need help, I just think that mix is so good. So good.
I do this on the regular when I can't open like a jar. I say, can you use your strong muscles and open this jar for me?
It makes me feel so manly. It does. It's like, yeah, I got this.
All right.
Something I can do, right? I don't know what's going to happen when I can't do that when I'm old anymore.
I'll get you one of those jar openers.
Oh, good. Okay. Good plan. Speaking of good plan, so the last one I was going to talk about is planning for future activities. This is a fun one, because when you plan together, we just took a trip with the family this summer. It was so much fun. And gosh, we have been planning, really, it's been 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And so we've planned this trip for a long time, and it was just a lot of fun, and it was something to look forward to, and brought us closer together, brought our family closer together, because we got the kids' input on this one, and it was just so much fun. So I think that can be something that can really save you and help you have something to look forward to. Planning it's really fun, and to get into the details of it, it's great. I was going to bring out one point here. That this relationship specialist said, talking and thinking about your future together reinforces it. And just a big amen to that. It reinforces your marriage, your time that you spend together, and reinforces the why you want to be together. And it's been a great exercise for Chanel and I.
Yeah. And, think back to when you were dating, and what would get you excited and kind of for me, it was when we would talk about our future. Even when you're in the very new stages of dating, even when you're talking about seeing each other next week, or, hey, there's this dance coming up or this movie coming out a month away, we should see that together. And you think, he still is planning on us being together next month or next year, or those kind of things get you excited. Well, it doesn't end just because you're married. That still is exciting. Yes, you've committed and you're here, but knowing that you have something in the future still lets you see, hey, we're planning this together. We're moving forward together. And that is a powerful thing. So these tips, I'm going to just read through them really quick to reinforce them in your mind. So these are 10 tips to keep relationship boredom at bay. So appreciate, don't assume bad intentions, make the relationship a priority, notice the good, find novelty, pray together, keep growing as individuals, become a soulmate, serve and be served, and plan future activities. So I think those are some awesome tips, and I hope you can put some of those into practice. Now, in this last little bit here, we want to talk about the good part of familiarity. Like James said, we've been married for almost 20 years here, and this familiarity definitely has some perks too.
Absolutely. One of the things I like to think about college football, I'm really excited for that coming up. There's a big game tonight, in fact, that I'm really excited about. But when a good professional or collegiate team is really good, what makes them good is the familiarity, knowing what each other's moves are going to be. If you guys remember a long time ago, the reign of the Chicago Bulls, the basketball team, those guys knew each other's moves, and it was fun to watch that. In any sports teams, you can see that if you are a sports fan, you can see that familiarity helps bring the wins. It just does. And apply that to your marriage. You can predict each other's moves. You have this team mentality, and I think that's so important. And that's one of the things you guys can actually pray for, is to have a team mentality. And I think that can be something that will bless your marriage and will help you grow together by predicting each other's moves and becoming familiar with what I'm just thinking that Chanel knows when I'm going to say something to the kids, and it's neat because we can play off of each other and make a pretty good team of it.
Yeah. And for me, I think that the biggest part about familiarity that is powerful is just having this person know you so well. When someone knows your worst side and your best side, and they still love you, and they get to keep getting on, you keep on getting to know each other every day, get to know each other a little bit better and a little bit better. And you're really seen and known. And that's what we all want. We all want to be known in that way. That's true intimacy, right? That's true connection. Here I am. This is how I really am. And that is familiarity in the best form, to have that, to see that, and to still love each other. So when we can get rid of that boredom, love each other for how we are, that is powerful. That is a strong marriage. So I hope you've had some great tips. I hope you are having fun in your marriage, and that familiarity is growing together for you guys, and that it's becoming something good, and you're becoming really known and working together as a team. And now we want to hear your thoughts. We would love to know how you think of familiarity. Do you think of it as a positive or a negative, and why? We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can share them with us on Facebook or Instagram at Moms Who Know Podcast, or talk about it with each other. Let each other know. This is a great topic to bring up with your spouse and to see, where you guys have some room for growth. So I am looking forward to hearing from you guys. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Moms Who Know.